go out very often.
Mm-hmm.
My state had a bad COVID outbreak about 2 months ago. It's much better now here in Michigan, but still, I don't go to restaurants anymore. I
Yes.
I just I'm
Here,
just
all of our restaurants are closed.
that's right. They've reopened them here in
Uh-huh.
my state, but I still don't go.
Yes, sure.
Me either. I just go to the restaurant to pick up the food and bring back home.
That's
Yes, delivery and pickup.
that's it.
That's
That's
what
it.
we're doing too. The schools are closed.
Our schools are closed. My daughter hasn't been in school since March.
Yeah, mine too. They're having online classes.
Yeah,
Do,
I mean,
do
it's
you
summer
know
here,
where?
so that we don't. School is closed for the summer, which is
Oh yes,
it's kind of silly.
yes, yeah. It's July. That's right.
That's
Here, yeah, here we are on winter,
I get that.
and my daughter is 6 years old, and she's learning to write and read. So it's being tough on her.
I'm sure it has. I'm sure it has.
Yes.
It's winter here, Jeff. As cold as Florida.
Well, I remember I was there in the winter. I was there in the winter of when was it? I was there. I was there
2014.
August of 2014,
Yeah.
and it was very hot.
Yes, that's our winter. Yes.
Do you know where Jeff lives?
No. In
He
Michigan?
lives in Grand Rapids, Michigan,
That's right.
on the Lake Michigan shoreline.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's a great place.
It's a beautiful place. It's a lake that I learned to body surf on.
Wow, that's great.
Boa tarde, Leandro. Tá
Boa
ouvindo?
tarde.
Ah, alô?
Leandro?
Oi, Leandro, boa tarde.
Boa tarde,
Tudo bem?
tudo bem?
Tudo, e vocês?
Tudo certo.
Leandro é o Leandro da Enel.
Leandro Charles GT. Eu não participei da última reunião. Os colegas meus que participaram, o Cristiano Hack e o Diogo Soliman.
Qual empresa?
CE Rio Grande do Sul.
Do Rio Grande do Sul.
So, Jeff, here we have Leandro from southern Brazil as well, from Rio Grande do Sul.
Very good.
And
Joel tá conectando.
Oi, tudo bom?
Oi, Joel, tudo bem?
Joel, also from southern Brazil. And we have here, Rafael is trying to get connected. He's a colleague at CEMIG. And Wesley, show up, Wesley.
Wesley Energisa.
Wesley is with Energisa utility from Western Brazil. But it's not only Western. He is in Western Brazil, but we have Energisa all over the place, all over the country. North,
Yes.
Northeast, Southeast, and West Brazil. It's one of our largest utilities. So,
É em inglês o negócio? O
Wesley,
cara é americano.
É americano, é. Mas o Pedro vai traduzir.
Vamos falar um pouco da dinâmica da nossa conversa hoje. Jeff, I'm gonna talk to
Okay,
about
thank you.
How our meeting will be run. Eu gostaria primeiro de introduzir para vocês Geoff Kempter. Geoff Kempter é um profissional da Asplan. Para quem não conhece, a Asplan é uma, se é que podemos chamar assim, é uma empreiteira norte-americana que trabalha com o setor elétrico. Mas é uma empreiteira muito maior do que praticamente todas as concessionárias. Para vocês terem uma ideia, a Asplan tem cerca de 50 mil empregados. Desses 50 mil, tem mais ou menos 20 e poucos mil dedicados à poda de árvores em sistemas elétricos, mais o controle de vegetação em faixas de passagem. Enfim, é uma empresa enorme. Ele é o gerente de operações e desenvolvimento de operações da Asplan, e, além disso, ele é o vice-presidente da UAA, que é a Utility Arborist Association. Podemos dizer que é a Associação de Eletroarboristas dos Estados Unidos. É uma organização não governamental que reúne aí cerca de 5.000 associados. É forte, é uma organização muito forte. Eu gostaria, inclusive, de sugerir que nossos colegas se filiassem a ela.
Nós podemos nos filiar daqui do Brasil?
Sim.
Sim.
Anyone can associate to UAA from all over the world. You can.
Ok.
Então, qualquer um pode se associar. É uma organização que oferece inúmeras oportunidades de desenvolvimento profissional, de educação. E eu mesmo sou associado, eu tenho uma certificação pela UAA, eu sou Boa tarde, Leandro. Eu sou um eletroarborista certificado. Então, eu acho que vale a pena. Bom, além disso, o Geoff Kempter está muito envolvido com o desenvolvimento de MIV nos Estados Unidos, ou como eles chamam, IVM.
IVM.
Integrated Vegetation Management. Ele faz parte de diversos comitês da UAA, da International Society of Arboriculture. Enfim, ele é uma... can I say you are IVM locomotive in North America, Geoff?
I am one of many locomotives, one of many.
Então, ele é uma das locomotivas que puxam o desenvolvimento e o aprimoramento da tecnologia. E, enfim, ele está muito envolvido nessa conversa. Nós já podemos começar, Angélica?
Ô Pedro, vamos explicar para ele. Você explicou para ele o que é o grupo? Qual é o... Podemos explicar juntos.
Go ahead.
Geoff, we will explain to you what is the purpose of this group. This group, we have to study IVM and to see why IVM is not a common practice in Brazil. We are very late if compared to USA, because now we are starting to register our herbicides for use in non-crop area. And now that we are showing all the electrical companies what is IVM. So we have to group this group first to study, to see what's the problem with vegetation in the electrical business, and to explain what is the IVM and why it's better to do this than como é que é roçada mesmo?
Mowing. Eu tô na televisão, te ligo daqui a 1h30. Pode ser ou é algo urgente?
So this is the purpose of this group. First, to understand better IVM, to see how did you guys get from mowing to IVM? Because here in Brazil, we have a serious problem that everybody thinks that herbicides is very bad for the environment, and they close at this: herbicide is bad, period. They don't understand that we can use herbicide in ways that is safe for the environment and for the population. So we are trying to talk about this, about using herbicide in non-crop areas.
Very good. I think that the information I have that I plan to present today will be very helpful.
Great.
Yep.
Okay. Pedro, I think we can start?
Yes, we can. Pessoal, então a coisa vai funcionar assim, nós vamos passar o comando para o Geoff, We are going to turn the command to you, Geoff. You're going to share your screen with a PPT file, I believe.
Very good.
Ele vai apresentar um arquivo PPT durante aí uma meia hora ou mais, e ele fala e eu traduzo logo a seguir. E no final nós vamos ter um espaço para perguntas e respostas. Ok?
Ju, você pode transferir para ele? Já foi.
Eu tinha autorizado já.
Ah, então tá. A Ju está muito rápida.
Can you see my screen now?
Yeah.
Yes, we
Yes,
can.
perfectly. Yes.
Good. Well, I want to start out by giving you a little thank you and a little bit of information that my daughter gave me. And she wanted me to say, "Hola, y meu nome es Geoff. Eu trabalho na Asplund. Obrigado por vir ao meu webinar."
Cool.
Very good. Great
Great.
Portuguese.
A lot.
It's my daughter translated for me. And
But she speaks Portuguese.
no,
But it's a great Portuguese.
she looked it up on Google.
Oh, okay. Tell her it's perfect.
Thank you. And I speak a little bit of Spanish, and I when I traveled to Brazil, I found it utterly confusing. So I will not. I'm going to stick strictly to English from here on out.
Ele fala um pouco de espanhol, mas quando esteve aqui no Brasil em 2014, ele ficou um pouco confuso com português e espanhol, então hoje vai ser tudo em inglês.
But if you feel comfortable in any topics, you may speak in Spanish. We could manage to understand it as well.
Está bien, pero no es muy bueno.
No hay problema.
So thank you, and I wanted to also start out just by saying how sorry I am that both of our countries are having such a difficult time right now, and I really look forward to coming back to Brazil as soon as I possibly can. So thank you.
Então,
It will be a pleasure.
Will be a pleasure, of course. Pessoal, precisa de traduzir ou está indo bem?
So far, so good.
Pessoal, precisa de traduzir?
No.
So what I-
Tá tranquilo. Pode
Da minha
continuar.
parte, não.
Thank
Tudo tranquilo.
Jeff, you don't need a translator. Everybody understands you. You speak very clear. So we have plenty of time now.
All right, very good. So what I want to cover today is a discussion of IPM and IVM. IVM is sort of a descendant of IPM, and so what that relationship is. And a brief history of IVM, where it came from, how it evolved in North America. And then I want to talk about the standards and the best management practices and credentialing programs we have in North America right now. Cover some of the basic principles of IVM. And then the most recent trends, including the recognition of the economic and environmental benefits of IVM, and both from a financial standpoint and then also from the standpoint of pollinators and other wildlife and the environment in general. So we'll cover all these things in the next half hour, 45 minutes or so.
Okay.
Well, first of all, we want to talk about IVM and IPM, and the fact that IPM, of course, is integrated pest management, and it's used with food crops. It's used to manage pests, insects mostly, funguses and diseases. It was developed mostly in the 1950s, evolved through the 60s and 70s, and it's now in wide use around the world. So we talk about integrated pest management. Everybody around the world knows what that is. Integrated vegetation management is evolved in parallel to IPM, and it's based on the similar concept that we want to encourage the beneficials and discourage the pests, in our case, unwanted vegetation. It too evolved through the 1950s and 60s, but it really first came into prominence and was named in the late 1980s and the 1990s. So it evolved parallel to, but it is not nearly as well known as IPM. So we in IVM, we operate in the shadow of IPM. And so there are a lot of definitions out there for integrated vegetation management. And I like to boil it down to a very simple one-sentence definition. And you look to the standards and they're more elaborate definitions, but I like to think of it as a dynamic system of managing plant communities to achieve a specific objective. And that objective can be many different things depending on what you're trying to do. But you're trying to manipulate the cover in an environment for a specific objective. And we've found that it's an economical process, and it's very effective in enhancing reliability, safety, access, visibility, the kinds of things you want to do on a right-of-way, and it's environmentally sound. In fact, it's a best practice. So it's a proven land management tool, and it's widely used now and coming into fruition around the world. And I show you two pictures here. One is of a demonstration project at the Pennsylvania Game Lands 33, which is what this second picture here is my understanding, was based on. The study in Pennsylvania was then basically duplicated and repeated in Brazil. And I had the opportunity to visit this site and go on this tour 6 years ago.
Just a second, Geoff.
Yes.
Explicar o que é Game Land 33. É onde essa história toda começou na década de 50. Era uma reserva de caça cruzada por essa linha de transmissão de 345 que vocês estão vendo aí. E a concessionária começou a usar herbicida. Os caçadores não gostaram muito, porque acharam que ia matar a caça, e só eles que podiam matar a caça, o herbicida não. Então foi aí que começou todo o desenvolvimento o desenvolvimento da metodologia do que hoje nós conhecemos como IVM, ou no Brasil, MIV. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pedro,
Sim,
tem muitos servos lá, né?
é cheio de cruzeirense.
Hã?
É cheio de cruzeirense.
Então, vamos ver o próximo slide, né?
Vamos lá. Go ahead, Geoff.
Sure. So I think one of the things that is evident in my experience with IVM is that the best way to get people to understand what we're doing is to bring them out to the site. So every opportunity we have with the Game Land site, it's easily accessed from the highway. We've brought busloads of people up there, and we'll bring tents up and we'll serve lunches and have an extended afternoon tour on a beautiful summer day, and it really opens people's eyes and gives them an idea of what's going on. When you're on the right-of-way, you should always be very careful, because you never know what you might find hiding in the brush. So let's look way back. You know, over 100 years ago, the grid was constructed, and it's still being expanded, of course, but the construction of the grid originally was done by hand. It was manual labor, it was rudimentary tools, it was horses and wagons, and the early maintenance activities, either in the initial clearing or subsequent, when they started having to maintain the vegetation, it was done by hand. And you see there's a primitive tractor up there doing some work early on, but it was difficult, it was dangerous, it was slow. And there was a need, obviously, in any forested environment to get a handle on managing this and maintaining reliable service. And early on, there were some researchers, and this gentleman here is Dr. Frank Egler. And he noticed that old farm fields with established perennial vegetation resisted the invasion of trees. And so just as an example, I took this picture in Michigan, but that field it's been more than 40 years since there was a crop in that field. and it's adjacent to a forest. Those are pines and maples, which have wind-blown seeds. And there's very few trees in that 40-acre plot. Most of those shrubs are invasive Russian olive. But it's true that there's an inherent resistance of an established perennial, of established perennial vegetation to invasion by trees. And other researchers, Egler and then Dr. Nearing, they discovered that just through observation and that shrubs were also highly resistant to invasion of trees. And this is sort of understanding the process of ecological succession. And yes, it's true that eventually this shrub community will be supplanted by a more mature climax forest. But it takes a lot longer if there's an established shrub community there or established low-growing plant community, because those low-growing plants don't want to be supplanted or by larger, taller vegetation. So there's a natural resistance. And this was all known way back in the 50s. And then coming back to the game land site again, and this is early on in the game lands, this is in 1955, these gentlemen, Dr. Bramble and Dr. Burns, demonstrated that not only does early successional cover resist invasion of trees, but it also is better for wildlife, certain kinds of wildlife anyway, and can provide a variety of habitat for different game species. So then we move on, and again in the 1950s, there was a big emphasis on these new chemicals, and there were new chemicals that had been discovered in the 1940s and were being rolled out by the chemical industry, and they were rolled out in a lot of ways in perhaps a less environmentally friendly way. There was a lot of overspray. There was a lack of understanding of some of the windblown effects. But what they were trying to do is go out and just spray everything on the right of way and take everything back, just like mowing, except you're mowing with a chemical rather than a machine. And so that was, a lot of that was done in the 50s. And then there was research done on different kinds of nozzles and different kind of chemistry and more selective methods and more selective chemistry. But a lot of wholesale, large scale, industrial scale vegetation management began to happen in the 1950s. And at the same time, IPM was being developed. And so we started to hear about this in the 50s and 60s, and the more selective approach of identifying the pest you're trying to control and then targeting your controls at those pests, identifying the beneficials and trying to protect the beneficials, monitoring the conditions and timing your treatments according to what's actually happening, and then developing an action threshold to prevent economic damage, and then evaluate the results and continually improve. So this is sort of that basic fundamental underlying tenet of both IPM and IVM that was being developed at about that time.
Just a second, please.
Yes.
We have some electrical engineers here who maybe do not know what IPM is. Pessoal da elétrica, IPM é Manejo Integrado de Pragas. É um conceito e uma prática já consagrada na agronomia, e é daí que surgiu o manejo integrado de vegetação e sistemas elétricos também. A metodologia é basicamente a mesma, só que uma controla a vegetação e a outra controla insetos, basicamente. Thank you, Geoff.
Thank you. And then the 1960s came along. In the 60s and 70s, there was an environmental movement, certainly in North America and around the world. And there was a book published called Silent Spring, which documented the effects of DDT on bird populations. Meanwhile, the US Army and the Air Force were dumping tons and tons of herbicides across South Vietnam, wiping out millions of acres of land, 18,000 square kilometers of land was sprayed and defoliated. Those products were tainted and contaminated. They were not pure herbicides. They were tainted with dioxins. There was a lot of air and water pollution. There was a big public backlash against pollution and chemicals in general. And so the industry had to look back at itself and begin to think of other ways of handling things. And chemicals got a bad name. And that's part of what we're dealing with still today. At about that time, people began to note the parallels between the research that had been done in right-of-way management and this emerging science of integrated vegetation management and what was already happening with crop science and integrated pest management. And so it was in the late 80s and early 90s that the term integrated vegetation management was coined and came into more common use. But still at that time, the vast majority of rights-of-way in North America were maintained with physical control, with mowing. But chemicals were making a comeback. And then in 2003, there was a blackout. There were 50 million customers affected. And that affected New York City and Toronto, the two largest cities in the two largest countries in North America. And plus Cleveland and Detroit and huge areas of Pennsylvania and New York and Ohio and Michigan and Quebec and Ontario. So a big chunk of the North American continent was affected by this blackout. And this blackout was caused by one tree. Now, there were a lot of other engineering problems behind the blackout, but it was a cascading event that was initiated by a tree contacting a transmission line, a 345 kV transmission line, and it resulted in this outage. And so that caught the attention of the regulators, and NERC, N-E-R-C, is the regulatory body that regulates utilities in both Canada and the United States. So it is an international regulatory agency because the grid in North America is interconnected. So the Canadian grid and the American grid are one and the same. So they're regulated by this one body, and this body issued some very strict regulations regarding how utilities are going to do vegetation management. And more interest, the IVM came back into interest because the utilities had allowed a lot of stuff to grow up, and there was a lot of encroachment along the edges of the right-of-way. And so the rights-of-way needed to be reclaimed, and then they needed to be maintained. And we were asked as an industry to write a standard for integrated vegetation management. So we did, we wrote a standard. And so I want to talk a little bit about those standards. And there was the first standard that we wrote, the American National Standard for Integrated Vegetation Management, A300. That was first written in 2007, and it's been revised twice since. There's been a recent revision in 2018. And then from that, we wrote a best management practices guide. And then there's now also a standard, an accreditation standard, which recognizes utilities. I'm going to talk a little bit more about each one of these standards so we understand how they work and how they're to be used. The American National Standards Institute, and Brazil has an equivalent organization.
ABNT. ABNT.
Yes. That's International Standards Organization is sort of the overlying international organization that these standards are in alignment with. So this is the standard for integrated vegetation management. It's only about 30 pages long, and that includes a bunch of annexes. The actual standard for IVM is only about 5 pages of material. So it lacks a lot of detail. It provides very basic information and is to be used to write specifications. So it needs to be fleshed out. It needs to have information added to it in order for it to be an effective body. But it is sort of the skeleton which underlies integrated vegetation management in North America. And from that, the ISA wrote this IVM Best Management Practices Guide. And it's written by my colleague and your colleague, Pedro, Randy Miller. And this is more about 80 pages. It's a peer-reviewed document and has a lot more detailed information about how to implement an IVM program. And it's currently under revision right now. The third edition will probably be out by the end of this year. And right now it's available in English and Spanish. And maybe we could make it available in Portuguese too, which I think would be very useful.
Just a second, please.
Yeah.
Pessoal, para quem não conhece, a ISA é a International Society of Arboriculture, Sociedade Internacional de Arboricultura. E profissionais de concessionárias de energia elétrica são provavelmente os que mais trabalham com árvore, não somente no Brasil, mas na América do Norte também. Então, a ISA funciona basicamente como a secretaria do comitê que elabora e atualiza as normas ANSI A300, que são ligadas a manejo de vegetação. Uma dessas normas da série A300 lida com manejo integrado de vegetação e é a ISA que desenvolve o que eles chamam de Best Management Practices, ou as melhores práticas de manejo, que é um detalhamento da norma. Thank you.
Thank you. And the final standard I wanted to mention is this accreditation from the Right-of-Way Stewardship Council. And it is a body that has put forth, it wants to promote best practices for utilities. And so if you meet the standards, these standards of excellence that they've put forward as a utility, you're awarded this accreditation, which then you can use in your logo and you can use in your advertising, and you can say to your constituents and your customers, the regulators, that you have demonstrated a commitment to good environmental stewardship and that you are protecting the environment in your right-of-way management activities.
Seria legal. Geoff, just a minute, please. Seria legal falar isso, né, Pedro?
Sobre o stewardship.
Sobre o selo, né? Que a concessionária que usa, né? E atende todas as normas dessa acreditação, elas recebem um selo que pode ser colocado no logo, né? Como uma empresa que utiliza uma atividade que prega as melhores práticas ambientais.
Só reforçando que é uma certificação bem rigorosa.
Sim.
Para se obter esse selo, é preciso de desenvolver programas de manejo de vegetação ambientalmente saudáveis e
de acordo com as normas, né?
Não é um diploma Sebrae, não. Eu tenho.
Thank you,
Não é uma
Geoff.
capina química, né, Pedro?
Como?
Também não é uma capina química, né? Eliminando tudo.
Não.
This accreditation, there's no reason why a Brazilian company couldn't apply for this. This was my question. Is this available to submit in Brazil as well? I think it could be. I think that we'd need to translate the documentation into Portuguese first of all, and but the program is certainly, it's international now. It's in Canada and the United States. AltaLink is a Canadian company, for example.
Okay.
And I know there are utilities in Quebec which is a French-speaking province, which are interested in this accreditation. So I don't see any reason. It would be a question for somebody other than me, but this could be taken to other countries without that much difficulty. It's not run by the government. It is an independent accreditation organization. So if you meet the standards, there's no reason not to recognize you.
And it's not clear to me what's the name of this accreditation institute or organization.
It's the Right-of-Way Stewardship Council.
Oh, there is no short name for it. It's
That's
just
the
this.
name of it. That is it.
No,
Okay.
no acronym.
We could make one.
Yes.
RSCA.
Roscoe.
So with that, I'd like to, I want to go through each one of these areas. These are the fundamental principles that are included in all three of these standard documents that I've mentioned. So the ISA's Best Management Practices Guide, the Right-of-Way Stewardship Accreditation, and the ANSI A300 IVM standard all agree on these fundamental principles that underlie what a good IVM program should be doing. And we'll go through them quickly, but we'll go through each one so we understand. The first principle is to comply with the law of the land. So you have to adhere to the labels of the products that are, governed by the governing authority. You have to respect the rights of others, the property rights, the rights of refusal. You have to respect the state and federal regulations that that you're in the country that you're working in. And then you have to understand what's going on out there on your right-of-way. The ecosystems that we work with are very complex. So we have to understand what happens to that ecosystem when we apply these treatments and understand how that then relates to the surrounding environment. That's a fundamental principle. You have to have the right to use the product, and you have to have the right to use the land that you're going to apply the treatment on. So whether it's through an easement, whether you own the land, whether there's some other legal arrangement or contract or permission, you have to have that before you implement an IVM program. And then you have to be able to control access to the site during your applications and discourage unauthorized use if it's inappropriate for people to use those sites. Another principle is to engage and communicate with your stakeholders. And we have stakeholders both internal and external. And internal stakeholders, by that I mean the employees that are doing the work. They have to understand what they're doing and why they're doing it, both utility and contractor. Management, upper management needs to understand the value of what we're doing. Other utility departments, we have a saying in English, the right hand needs to know what the left hand is doing. And then the owners and the stockholders of the company, you have to make sure they understand, what it is you're doing, why we're doing it, the value to the stockholder. It has to be there. We wouldn't be doing it if it weren't valuable, but they need to understand.
Yes.
And then, of course, there are the customers, the external stakeholders, the property owners, the communities surrounding the areas, the communities that we're serving, the media outlets, television, newspapers, the government agencies that may be regulating or overseeing or sharing the land with you, and environmental groups. We need to engage and help them understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. And a lot of that, we're getting buy-in for IVM from environmental groups in North America because they recognize that what we're doing is actually benefiting the same cause that they're working for.
Just a second, Geoff.
Yeah.
Just to explain you, one of the main problems some of our colleagues who are attending the call is related to government agencies. Though we have herbicides labeled for IVM use, for non-agricultural use, some state agencies don't allow the utilities to use the herbicides. And it's crazy because in southern Brazil, for example, we have a very extensive agriculture, soybeans and wheat in rotation crop. And sometimes they spray 24 times a year on those crops, but the state agency won't allow the utility to do it once a year. So it's very important what you're saying, engaging the authorities and agencies.
That is so true. And it's true in North America too. The amount of herbicide used in agriculture just dwarfs what we use. And the way they use it, and they, you know, they basically spray entire states with Roundup. and we're using it very judiciously in a selective way. So that's part of the education process. Another principle is to establish your plans and your objectives. Know clearly what you're trying to accomplish. And then as you do that, we're taking into account, again, the biology, the ecology, the cultural resources on the site, the economic factors, and the laws and regulations that apply. And while we're doing that, then we have to be thinking, why are we doing this? These are our plans, our objectives. What are we really trying to accomplish with this, this program? And so I have a list here of possible objectives. The obvious: utility service reliability, access to these sites, reducing the cost of maintenance, enhancing safety for the workforce, because it's really much safer to apply chemical than it is to wield a chainsaw. Ensuring those lines of sight, improving your habitat for pollinators, for wildlife, controlling noxious weeds, invasive species that are coming into these corridors, and the risk of wildfire, which is, I'm sure, as big an issue down in Brazil as it is in the United States.
Yes.
So another principle here is to establish an action threshold and to understand your tolerance level. So an action threshold is, when do you act? When do conditions on the right of way require you to do something? And then, as opposed to a tolerance level, is that's the absolute maximum before something terrible would happen. So before you get to a tolerance level, you have to do something, but it might not be optimum. When you really want to do it is at the action threshold. And so you're looking for a sign out there. This is monitoring the conditions on the right of way, understanding what's going on with those vegetative communities. So it might be density, a certain number of counts of unwanted species. It might be the height of those species approaching the wires. It might be the species themselves, the fast growing ones that you don't want or the invasive ones. And it might be the location of them. You know, they're around the towers, they're in the sag, and the overall condition. So these are the kinds of things that would trigger a treatment. You say, it is time to go mow. It is time to go spray. It is time to go do whatever we're going to do. As opposed to the tolerance level. The tolerance level, if you get past that, there is a power outage. If you get past the tolerance level, you can't spray anymore. The vegetation is too tall. Now you have to go back and mow, or now you have to go back and cut with a chainsaw. So you don't ever want to get to the tolerance level. You want to act at the action threshold. And then we want, now that we know what's going on out there, we've monitored the conditions, we know what's happening, we know it's time to do something. What is it that we're going to do? We have to pick some kind of a treatment. And so in IVM, we've divided them into several categories. They're biological controls, chemical controls, cultural controls, physical, that is manual or mechanical, and then we added another category, prescribed fire. So these are control options that you may have. Think of them as a menu. We're gonna choose one or more depending on what we're looking at on our right of way. And I want to emphasize that sometimes it's not one or the other. Sometimes it's going to be a combination, and sometimes there's a little bit of overlap between what's a cultural control or what's a manual or a physical control. And very often we start, for example, if we want to convert that right-of-way to a cropland, we're still going to have to go in and mow it or spray it. So we start out with something, and then we move over to cultural. And then the cultural control takes over. You might say that pruning is both physical control, but it's also part of a cultural method. So there's the definitions here can be a little bit loose, you know, but we have to remember that there is overlap. And that ultimately what we're trying to do is maximize our biological controls. The biological controls are going to be the least expensive because they're doing the work for you, and the most environmentally friendly in general. So I'll talk a little bit about biological controls, and we've been emphasizing this all along: plants and animals and insects, diseases, pathogens, using the natural resistance of low-growing vegetation by competition, by allelopathy, by depredation, by feeding on seeds and trees and woody plants. We try to encourage all that to do the work for us. That's a biological control.
Just a second, please.
Yes.
Pessoal, para quem não conhece, ele está falando de allelopathy. Em português, alelopatia. É um fenômeno pelo qual algumas espécies de plantas rasteiras, principalmente, produzem substâncias e liberam pelas raízes, e essas substâncias inibem a germinação e o desenvolvimento de outras espécies, principalmente espécies arbóreas. Thank you.
Yeah, think of allelopathy as a natural herbicide.
Yeah.
Emitted by another plant. And we see how incredibly effective these established perennial meadows can be in discouraging a tree from being established. And then we can have, you know, with a poppy with a nice, stable, low-growing cover, there's plenty of cover for a seed eater like a rodent. And we think of rodents as pests, but in this case, they're eating. If a tree drops a seed onto your right of way, it's going to be picked up by that mouse. But if you mow, of course, you're going to mow all the mice and you destroy their habitat. So mowing upsets this balance. So if you can create that stable cover and encourage all these other allies, you're doing yourself a big favor. So wildlife, in a lot of cases, is your friend. Now, chemical controls, we use herbicides as needed, and herbicides are usually a step toward biological controls. So first, if your stem density is such that chemicals are not practical, you have to mow, you go in and mow, but then you get sprouting back, and then you can apply some chemicals to the sprouts and discourage the roots. But the whole idea of the chemical is to facilitate more biological controls. So it almost seems ironic, but the more chemical you use, the more you use chemical controls, the more you're encouraging biological controls if you're doing it properly. Cultural controls, I look at that as some other land use altogether. So croplands under a power line, brilliant. The farmers want to use that land, brilliant. The park district wants to create a park under that power line, brilliant. You want to put a parking lot under that power line, brilliant. We'll take it. They're not practical everywhere, but where they are practical, we'll take it. Physical, we understand what physical is. This is the physical removal, destruction, either by hand or with machinery. So these are your mowers and your excavators and chainsaws and hand pruners and climbers. Prescribed fire, and this obviously has to be used judiciously, very carefully. It's not always appropriate. You can cause an outage just with the smoke. So it's something that we would do in conjunction usually with a government authority. So I wanted to put this slide in. This is something I developed. It shows the idea is that we want to be transitioning away from the more costly and more environmentally damaging physical controls, and through controlled fire or chemical control or maybe a cultural control for a while, but ultimately we want to transition as much as possible to the biological controls. Now this course, it's not a one-way street. If you're implementing maximum biological control, you still may need to go back and use a chainsaw or apply chemical on a periodic basis. But the point is, the more biological controls you put into place, the less interventions you have to have on the other side, on the physical side, and the less expensive it's going to be overall. And by the way, I will, make this, I'll post this to you, Pedro, so you guys can keep this presentation.
Oh, thank you. It would be great.
It will. There's some links in here to some other sites that we'll get to, some other studies and things like that will be live, and you can use those.
Thank you.
Then ultimately we made our selection. We've selected whatever it is that we're going to do, and then we are going to implement that, and we're going to implement it to the specifications. You have to write a spec. What is it that you're going to target? How are you going to do it? Are you going to do it with chemicals, with fire, with machines? Which machines? Where are you going to use these machines? How are you going to do this? So that's the implementation phase. And obviously this is where the work gets done. It has to be done right. And so that all comes down to a good specification and workers who know what they're doing. And then after this, we come back around and we look at what we did, and we make sure we did it right. Was there a problem? Did we miss things? Was there overspray? What happened? What went wrong? What went right? How can we improve the specification so that it's even more effective the next time we do it? So the records have to be kept, and you want to make any corrections and improve the process. So these are all fundamental principles of IVM. So I've gone through that whole list now of basic principles. And this particular chart here, which, this is a proposed chart for the next IVM Best Management Practices Guide. But I think it pretty much sums it up, and I think this is going to wind up in the next guide. So it just shows this sort of continuous ongoing process. And starting up in the upper left with making sure you have a plan, a strategic plan with objectives, and that you're moving through this process. And you note there in the corner, it says the order of the processes may vary or may occur. So some of these steps are happening at the same time, or may happen in a different order depending on how you design your program. But all of these steps need to be included in any good IVM program. So now I wanted to talk a little bit about where we're going, and this new report that just came out. This is a research paper that was published by John Goodfellow, another colleague of Pedro and me. And it's to demonstrate the cost efficiency of IVM, and it compares different vegetation management strategies on utility right-of-way, and projects costs and compares the effects of these various treatments. And so Goodfellow led this team of researchers and published this report last year in 2019. It's 58 pages. You guys have some time? That was a joke. That was
Just a second, just a second. Pessoal, John Goodfellow, um dos maiores pesquisadores de manejo de vegetação e sistemas elétricos da América do Norte. O cara é fera. Vocês receberam no LinkedIn um papel, um documento que o Geoff sintetizou esse trabalho que ele está mostrando agora de 58 páginas. Aquele documento é um resumo desse trabalho coordenado pelo John Goodfellow. Thank you, Geoff.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to boil this down to 3 slides, the 3 most important slides in the paper, in my opinion. And this is the first one. So this shows you the mechanical mowing in orange, the costs over time, going out 20 years, compared to the costs of IVM. And you can see that IVM starts higher because you have to do both treatments. You have to mow and then you apply chemicals. So that adds the cost in the first cycle. But it lasts longer. And then subsequent costs in IVM are going up much, much more slowly compared to the cost of mowing on an ongoing cycle. Even the mowing cost, you see the mowing cost begins to flatten out around year 12, year 13, but still it's not flattening as fast as the IVM cost. So overall, you are at half the cost or less by implementing IVM. So from a cost basis, you're way ahead of the game with an IVM program because it reduces the need for the mechanical and it lengthens the cycle between treatments. Why does that happen? Well, this is how dense, the density of stems, the density of unwanted trees on the right-of-way. And with an IVM approach, you quickly drive that number of stems down. So very, very quickly, you're looking at a reduction in the stem count. And so it just costs less to keep those numbers down than with a strictly mowing basis. You have to keep coming back and mowing, and there's still a lot of stems out there. So you drive the number of stems way down with IVM. And that's because you're controlling the roots. When you just mow, you mow off the top, but the roots are still alive and they come sprouting back with a vengeance. And so you can't really get control. But if you use the IVM method and you kill the roots of those woody plants, that then gives the herbaceous and low-growing plants a chance to get established, and then they start doing the work for you.
There's a saying in Brazil, to kill the evil by the root.
There you go. That's what this is all about. And then this one, because we're very concerned about tall growing vegetation. So the woody stems that are out there, how fast are they growing? Well, with a mechanical approach, again, you've saved the root system. So the roots have all this energy and they push up a lot of growth. And then that growth gets up there above the lower growing vegetation and they do what they do. They're tall growing trees and they begin to grow tall. But if they're competing with the low growing vegetation, they just don't grow as fast. So what few stems you do have left on your right of way are not growing as fast in an IVM program because they're competing with all this established low growing vegetation. So I think those 3 items are very important in this study. And the other, the final, probably the most important thing about this study is not only do you save half your cost, have far fewer trees, and the trees that are there are growing more slowly. All of these benefits down below are improved or unaffected. So safety and reliability is every bit as good with an IVM approach. Recreational use of the right-of-way, it's easier to, there's more things you can do out there because you can actually walk around and see things. Maybe it's hunting, maybe it's bird watching, maybe it's playing frisbee. I don't know what they're doing, but they're out there doing things on the right of way, and it's easier to do it because you're in a meadow, not a thicket. So it looks nicer. The aesthetics of the right of way can be nicer, especially if you've encouraged wildflowers and a meadow habitat. When you do go in to maintain the site, it's not such a nuisance. There's not this noise and smoke and just debris. The effects of an herbicide, the occasional herbicide treatment, are barely noticeable. Water quality is improved. There's less erosion. There's more compatible vegetation on the right of way, and wildlife habitat is improved. So your environmental benefits are all there.
So Geoff, just
yes.
a second, please. I'd like to highlight the importance of right-of-ways treated with IVMs for pollinators, especially bees and butterflies and birds. It's amazing how that works and how beneficial they are.
Yeah, in fact, I've got a slide about it.
Oh, you're getting there. Sorry.
It's all good. So, and like I say, I will post this. We can Dropbox this to you, Pedro, and you can keep it available. But here's the links. Here's the entire study there. And then I wrote for Tree Care Industry Magazine, I wrote about a 4-page summary. So it's a 58-page report, but I condensed it down to about 4 pages of in my opinion, much easier to understand material. So I'll post both of those links and get this to you folks.
Great.
The other big push in North America right now is the pollinators. And that's what Pedro was just saying. All around the world, pollinators populations have been declining. And utilities have this incredible opportunity to enhance the environment. I mean, we have to maintain a low-growing environment underneath our power lines. We can't have large trees, but we can have meadows, and we can have stable, low-growing, herbaceous cover, which is very friendly to butterflies and bees, and any species that operate well in that environment. So this is a huge opportunity. And I include another link here. There's the Electric Power Research Institute, which is the research arm of the utilities in the United States. They just created this pollinator video. It's a 20-minute video, and it's professionally produced, and it's just candy for the eyes. It is beautiful to see. The shots of the close-up shots of the butterflies and the bees, and the research that underlies it. They interview one of our colleagues, Lou Payne. Pedro, you may have met Lou at one time or another from New York, but he's featured in this video as well. So there's a link to that. Again, it's just a YouTube video, so anybody can watch it. But the benefits of pollinators, the benefits to pollinators, the potential benefits of our activities can be enormous. And again, at no additional cost to the utility. In fact, by implementing a good right-of-way maintenance plan with IVM, you get the pollinators and you get the reduced costs and you get the environmental benefits all together. So that's what we covered. We talked about the history. We talked about the relationship with IPM. We talked about the standards, the basic principles of IVM, and some of these latest trends. And I think we have some time if anybody has any questions or wants to discuss this further.
Thank you, Geoff. Wonderful. Very good and clear explanation. You told us a very good story. Fantastic.
Nice presentation.
Yeah.
One thing I didn't see, I don't know whether it was once tried in US or Canada, is the use of the right of way to agriculture purpose.
The right of way for agriculture?
Agriculture purposes, like growing crops for food or something like that.
Yeah, that we call a cultural control.
Yes.
That's an alternative use of the right of way. And we certainly encourage that. It's not always practical. And this image you see right now, for example, that's a rugged mountainous area in Pennsylvania that's not suitable for agriculture. So it has to be managed. And I know there's a lot of that in Brazil. There's areas where I'm sure you've got power lines that go for miles over soybean fields, and that's all well and good. But there are a lot of places too where you've just got, you have to maintain woody vegetation. But we try to encourage alternative land use wherever that's feasible.
Okay, good. Thanks.
Pessoal, perguntas, façam diretamente para ele. Caso não queiram fazer, façam para mim ou para a Angélica. Está na hora do bombardeio.
Yeah, I love this slide.
Yeah.
The history in the Americas. Great. Right, Pedro?
Yeah. North and South and Central America.
That's right.
We are beginning. We are in the beginning of the process, but we will get there.
About the chemicals that are being used in the USA for IVM, are they already available in South America, Brazil particularly, or you are not accounted of that?
You asked about the chemicals?
Yes.
Yeah, I would. Pedro, I know that herbicides are widely used in agriculture there. You probably have all the same. I know when I was down there.
We don't. For here in Brazil, the herbicides have to be registered as non-crop,
I see.
and we have just a little kind. It's not very much herbicide registered to non-crop, but now the industry is starting to see a potential market for the non-crop areas.
Well, when I was there, I know that at the time it was Dow. Now it's
yes, Corteva.
But Corteva, Dow was pushing, and I can't remember the woman's name, Pedro. I don't know if she's still involved in the industry or not.
Valesca,
yeah.
No, she's not in Dow anymore.
Yeah.
She's with BASF.
Yes.
Okay. Well, so she's still in the biz.
Yeah, we have here Garlon.
Yep.
Domino. And a new one, it's a triple mister. It's called Pluris.
I don't know.
By Corteva. Pluris is, I don't remember. Let me see the ingredients.
Angelica.
Yeah.
I believe that's better. You talk about the ingredients, active.
Yes.
Like,
yeah, do you remember?
What you have here in Brazil is triclopyr, that's Garlon.
Garlon, yeah.
Yes, like
and fluroxypyr, that's Dominum. The mix of fluroxypyr and aminopyralid, that I don't remember the commercial name. You have the triple mix with picoloram, triclopyr, and the fluroxypyr, and you have glyphosate, you have imazapyr. That's all that's registered for IVM.
Well, you're well on the way. That's most of the ones that are in wide use here as well.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some new products, and I'm not a chemist. There are some new products that are, again, they're based on the same underlying chemistry with some improvements.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not familiar with the details, I know that there's some that are just being released this year that Corteva they're very excited about it.
Yes, they're very strong.
And but they are better products too.
Mhm.
They are more selective. They're less soil active. They're better things about them. So sometimes you want the soil active properties, sometimes you don't. And
Yes.
so the tank mix becomes this is where the technicians becomes so important, understanding how to apply it properly without damaging something along the side. You don't want a soil active product at the edge of the right of way, because you start to damage trees on the edge of the right, and then the trees falling on your power lines, and that's not part of the plan.
Yes.
Or you damage the neighbor's trees, and the neighbor gets very angry.
Yeah.
He's senator, and so it is very, very important to have good technical expertise when we talk about what chemicals to use, where to use them, how to apply them, when to apply them. If the wind is carrying them off and taking out, somebody's vineyard or grapevines, that's just it's a public relations disaster.
Yeah. Hey guys.
Pessoal, alguém tem alguma dúvida? Vocês querem fazer alguma pergunta para o Geoff? Aproveitar que a gente está com uma pessoa que entende. Vocês conseguiram entender bem a apresentação?
Para mim foi ótimo. Crystal clear.
Thank you for that.
E mais, meninos e meninas?
I just
Pedro?
Oi, Lu, pode falar.
Oi. Eu vou explorar com ele a questão cultural do uso do MIV aqui no Brasil. Aqui muitas concessionárias já começaram a fazer alguns experimentos, fizeram, mas o que foi feito não foi o IVM, foi uma capina química, porque não se pensava no início ter plantas de maior tamanho, mas as empresas acabaram no final deixando uma vegetação mais rasteira, né? Como vencer essa questão cultural de realmente as pessoas entenderem e aceitarem o tipo de vegetação do IVM?
Geoff, Luciano is saying that in Brazil, a few utilities have carried out some, let us say, assessment, IVM assessment, but it's not truly IVM. It's kind of a chemical weeding that brings everything down, and it's not quite a selective control of undesirable plants. How do you see, what is the way to show utilities that IVM is not chemical weeding? A change in the cultural perception that we don't want anything below the wires.
Yeah, I think part of it is these demonstrations and getting people to the sites. So I don't know if the site here in this picture, is that site still being maintained?
Yes.
Is that a site you can bring people and show them?
Yes, we have.
How it should be done?
Yes.
So the way that it's worked in North America is these demonstration sites, and I'm thinking of game lands, but a lot of utilities then looked at what was happening in game lands in Pennsylvania, and they said, well, we're in Florida. Florida is different than Pennsylvania. It's 1,000 miles away. Is that going to work down here? Well, let's see. So they'll get with their local university, and they'll set up a few plots and do these demonstrations. And then, sure enough, it works in Florida. It works in California. But we have to be careful in California because of the fire hazard. So they manage it a little bit differently. But you need demonstrations. In Brazil, it's a bigger country than the United States. I mean, you've got everything from the desert,
tropical forests.
Yeah, and it's going to be different wherever you go. But
yes,
the underlying what we have found out, and part of this demonstration, these two demonstrations I've got pictured on the screen right here, is you can be in completely different climates, completely different environments, and still have very similar underlying principles. And those principles are laid out, that those fundamental principles of IVM, I don't know of any place where they don't apply. So you can do this anywhere. It's just a matter of using the right chemicals and getting the right people and you know, the technical expertise to make it work.
Geoff, by the way, the picture on the upper corner of the slides is in Brazil?
That is absolutely in Brazil.
Oh.
area.
Essa fotografia aí, pessoal, é região de Divinópolis, aqui em Minas Gerais, tá? São duas linhas do Rafael.
Yeah, you know where it is. I can't remember the name of the town, the site.
Divinópolis.
Yeah, there you go.
That's it. More precisely, São José do Salgado.
Very precisely.
I would like to say about the Luciana question that the range of herbicides to have for IVM is not too great, but it's enough to do a very good IVM program. The problem in some companies that the decision that come from the environmental people or biologists, they come from the economists. So, in the majority of the cases, it's a more profitable, it's a less cost to use the one herbicide that is low action spectrum, and they kill all the plants.
Yeah.
They do it's just a chemical ruin. This is not IVM.
I agree with you. When I talked about the history of IVM in the 1950s, there were utilities that went out with high pressure nozzles and just sprayed the whole right away. Just spray everything and bring it all, just brown everything out. And just, it's chemical mowing.
Yes.
Yes.
And there's danger there, and I mean, without any roots, without any plants at all, you've got erosion, you've got concerns. So I think it's important to this idea of, you know, one of the principles is engaging the stakeholders within the company. You know, very often the environmental department doesn't know what the line department is doing. You know, so the line department does something, and the environmental department, why did you do that? And the environmental department says, wait, you can't do that. And the line department says, what do you mean we can't do that? So the point is that this is in everybody's interest to get a good IVM program, but the environmental people have to understand the value of the herbicide and how to use it. And the line department has to understand that it's going to work every bit as well as the mower. And so there's a lot of education that has to occur. And that's where I come back to a Goodfellow's paper. This report here. And this is what really drove John to write this report, because it is cheaper and it does protect the environment. And the report makes a very clear case for it. And that's why it's 58 pages, but it really does. It measures all these variables. And so I would encourage, you know, you to get a hold of this and see if we can translate it or make some hay with it, because it really makes the best case yet. Not that we've had a good case all along, but he really did go out and quantify these things in the most objective way possible. So it's really quite it's a very strong case he makes in this report.
Ok. Mais alguma pergunta? Lu, foi respondida?
Foi. Uma outra pergunta. Nos Estados Unidos, quando é construída uma nova linha de transmissão, distribuição, eles usam o IVM desde o início ou é no momento seguinte? Quando ocorre a decisão de utilizar o IVM?
Jeff, Luciana wants to know when a new line is being built in North America, do you or is IVM generally used from the very beginning, as soon as the line is being built?
Yeah. If you start from the very beginning with an IVM management objective, of course you can't clear the right of way with herbicide. That would be an inappropriate use of herbicide. So IVM says we're going to look at what needs to happen and apply the best tools in that environment. So for initial clearing, you're going to use chainsaws and mowing machines, and you're going to grind everything up and knock it all down to the ground. But then the IVM begins. You've done that, and the engineer might say, okay, we're done. But the vegetation manager, the IVM manager, says, no, we have to treat the stumps.
Mm-hmm.
Or we'll wait until next year and we get the sprouts that grow up to about waist high, and then we'll treat all the sprouts. Whether you treat the stumps or whether you treat the sprouts, you're going to use a chemical that after you do the initial clearing to kill the roots. And once the roots are controlled, then the seed bank takes over. Now and believe it or not, just about everywhere, there is a seed bank. So things will start to grow that are not trees. And those are our friends. Now, if some of them happen to be invasive, then in subsequent treatments with herbicide, we'll target not only the tall growing woody vegetation, but we'll target the Japanese knotweed or whatever else is growing in there that we don't want to grow in there. But you start that IVM process right from the beginning. And that's why that graph, this graph here, you start a little bit higher with IVM because you have the extra treatment at the same time. The engineer says, you're at year zero, and you've gone in and you've gone ahead and you've cleared it, and then you have to do the treatment, the IVM treatment as well. So that pushes the cost, the overall cost of that initial clearing project is higher. But then you look out, with the IVM treatment, because you killed the roots, you don't have to treat as soon. Now you're 5 years out instead of 4 years out, and on and on. So you see that when you're starting from scratch, when you're starting right at the beginning, you start with IVM, but the best tool at the time is chainsaws and mowing machines, plus an herbicide treatment to control the woodies once and for all. Does that help?
Yeah, and there is one more thing. From a regulatory point of view, use of herbicide as the line is being built is very, very interesting because it's regarded in Brazil as capital expenditure, and all the investment is paid back by the fair. And on the other hand, if you do it 1 year after the line is built, it's operational expenditure. So it's very interesting for utilities to use herbicide as the line is being cleared because it's an investment that's paid by the regulatory rules, and it reduces the maintenance cost later. So it's a very interesting methodology to use when you build new lines here in Brazil.
Tudo certo, Lu?
Seu microfone está desligado, Lu.
Obrigada, ok.
Ok. Mais alguém fazer alguma questão, comentário? Acho que não, Pedro.
Geoff, I believe there is no more comment, no more questions. On behalf of all this group here, I would like to thank you for your availability, for your goodwill in joining us and tell us this wonderful story of IVM. I really hope we can have you down here in Brazil many more times, and maybe some of our colleagues go visit North America and get to know IVM better.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
Me gusto mucho. Obrigado.
Geoff, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hope to see you soon.
I hope so too. Stay safe. Stay well.
You too.
Geoff, we may keep online to discuss a little bit more of our next steps with the group. It will be in Portuguese, but if you want to join us, you are very welcome.
I appreciate that. What I'm going to do is package this up, and I'll send you a Dropbox, Pedro.
All right.
and then you can distribute from there. All right.
Thank you
Great.
very much.
Thank you, Geoff, very much.
Big hug.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Pessoal, muito bem. Acho que já foram 1h20, né, Pedro? Vamos aos comentários. Alguém tem algum comentário? O que vocês acharam dessa palestra? Gostaram?
A palestra foi bastante esclarecedora, foi muito bom e levantou pontos que devem ser muito bem considerados pelas companhias hidrelétricas, que são os ganhos econômicos e ambientais que tem esse método. Hoje, ganho ambiental pode se traduzir como ganho econômico também. E discutir melhor nas próximas etapas a questão do que é o IVM, do tipo de uso que você vai fazer do controle químico. Nós temos vários tipos de herbicidas. Nós temos herbicidas seletivos e os não seletivos, são aqueles que matam toda a vegetação. E existem modos muito úteis de aplicar os não seletivos, mas tem que ter muito cuidado para isso, tem que ter muito preparo para isso. E também outra coisa que nós recomendamos é que, na realidade, seja dada uma grande a diversidade que nós temos de produtos no sentido de minimizar os efeitos ambientais. É claro que em alguns locais você necessita usar um produto de uma forma, mas em outro local tem que ser de outra forma. Então, muito cuidado na hora da escolha. Eu acredito que aplicar um só produto em toda uma linha não é uma atitude técnica. Não é uma atitude técnica de maneira nenhuma. E isso nós temos que manter. Nós temos que tomar muito cuidado para isso tudo, porque o IVM ele se baseia em diversidade. E a diversidade tem que prever um conhecimento técnico bastante grande para ser feito. Para isso.
Nesse sentido, professor, eu acho assim, no primeiro momento, as concessionárias vão comprar a IVM ou vão comprar a ideia baseadas no custo operacional e na eficiência do controle. Claro que é um aspecto extremamente importante, eu acho que dos mais importantes que tem é a faixa ser um pedaço da paisagem ambientalmente muito saudável. Por quê? Porque a vegetação que cresce alimenta pequenos roedores, pequenos mamíferos, pássaros, abriga esses animais e ainda essa vegetação típica do início da sucessão florestal atrai muito polinizador. esse é o ponto que nós temos que mostrar para as concessionárias também. Mas como é que nós vamos mostrar isso? Nós precisamos de informação, precisa de caracterizar a vegetação da faixa para mostrar que aquilo que está crescendo lá, que foi proporcionado pelo herbicida, é ambientalmente saudável e desejável. Aí sim nós vamos mostrar um ganho para essa turma. Agora, nós temos que saber o que está acontecendo lá. Aí, levantamento florístico é extremamente importante.
Ô Pedro, você se recorda na área de Caetés? É Caetés ou Caeté, não sei.
Caeté, no singular. Era só um índio.
Na primeira vez que foi aplicado, realmente ficou uma vegetação debaixo de um porte mais ou menos de 1 metro, 1,5 metro. E você recorda que existia uma quantidade de animais muito grande.
Sim, era aça-peixe.
Borboletas, abelhas.
Muito, muito mesmo. Sim, professor, mas nós temos que mostrar isso de uma forma científica.
Está em curso. Está em curso essa demonstração.
Eu acho que seria legal, por exemplo, né, na próxima conversa nossa, nós convidarmos, por exemplo, quem está um pouco mais avançado com o uso dessa metodologia para fazer uma apresentação aqui. A Energisa Mato Grosso do Sul, que já tem 3 anos que está trabalhando com isso. A CEMIG Transmissão, que tem 2 anos que está trabalhando com isso. De forma breve, apresentar a metodologia e, se possível, ganhos na qualidade ambiental da faixa. Isso é importante. Então, sabe, porque o Rafael, eu falo você, Rafael, mas sem crítica, sem nada. O Rafael olha para a faixa e vê que só tem grama, capim e erva, ele fala, sensacional. É isso que eu quero. Se possível, eu quero um green do campo de golfe aí. Eu não culpo por isso não, cara. Sabe? Mas é um cara receptivo, tanto que ele está aqui ouvindo, está participando. Mas nós temos que mostrar qual é o ganho ambiental, sabe, professor? Só falar que tem ganho ambiental, eu acho que não vai convencer muito, não. Nós temos que mostrar quais são esses ganhos.
Eu acho que a gente poderia pedir realmente para ver se a CEMIG aceita apresentar, né? A Energisa também, falar com o Edmar, o Wesley está aqui também, se eles aceitam apresentar. E uma outra conversa que a gente pode ter também é explicar sobre os herbicidas. Quais são utilizados, como dar uma geral sobre o que são os herbicidas, porque tem muita gente que não sabe.
Isso, os princípios ativos.
Os princípios ativos, outra coisa. Como que ele é registrado, sabe? Eu acho que a gente podia... O que vocês acham de uma nossa... Enquanto o pessoal... Tá. Enquanto o pessoal daí a gente pede para a Energisa e para a CEMIG fazer alguma coisa, fazer uma apresentação, no próximo encontro nosso a gente falar sobre herbicidas, os herbicidas que são utilizados no MIV, para a gente desmistificar, sabe, esse mito de que o herbicida faz mal, não importa como ele é utilizado. Para a gente mostrar que sim, eles têm muitos estudos feitos e que se utilizado da maneira correta, de acordo com a bula, ele não traz problema. O que vocês acham desse próximo tópico para a gente conversar? Pode ser?
Concordo, acho uma ótima ideia.
Ô, Angélica, desculpa, eu tive que atender uma ligação bem no meio da conversa. A respeito da apresentação, só recapitulando para mim, fazendo um favor. A respeito da apresentação da Energisa, a respeito do...
sim, a gente estava pensando assim, Wesley, nesse próximo, no mês que vem, a gente falar sobre herbicidas, tá? No outro mês, para dar um tempo mais para vocês, as duas empresas que estão utilizando o MIV hoje é a CEMIG e a Energisa, com mais tempos, né, de MIV. Então, a gente pensar se vocês pudessem fazer uma apresentação de antes ou depois, mostrar como é que está agora a linha que vocês utilizam com MIV, como é que ela está agora?
Não, legal, eu acho interessante a gente fazer essa troca aí de experiências aí, do que a gente tenha implementado aqui, não vejo nenhum problema. Então seria, se no próximo mês a gente entraria, então, um debate a respeito de herbicidas, seria em agosto Ok.
Isso,
tranquilo.
assim dá tempo,
Vamos
ainda mais com
conversar a
essa
respeito.
história de convite não, Covid, né? A gente consegue mostrar isso. Aí, mês que vem, a gente trabalha com herbicidas. Tá? Mostrar um pouco sobre o que é, sobre quanto demora para ser registrado, como ele é utilizado, modo de ação, modo de aplicação. A gente faz uma geral sobre herbicidas não agrícolas.
Legal, combinado.
Combinado? Pode ser? E aí eu falo com o pessoal do CEMIG também.
Pode
Mais
ser sim,
alguém?
a gente vai conversando a respeito.
Perfeito, Wesley.
Angélica, você
Obrigada.
fala com o Robson?
Sobre?
A apresentação.
Ah, Robson da CEMIG, desculpa, é que é muito Robson na minha vida. Falo, pode deixar.
Não, mas não é Robinson, não. É
É Robson.
Robson.
Eu falo com o Robson e com o Kleber, pode deixar.
Beleza.
Eu falo com eles. Gente, mais alguém queria comentar alguma coisa? Nós já estamos indo com 1h30, eu acho que a gente podia, né?
Eu gostaria. Alguns pontos da apresentação do Geoff que talvez nós possamos começar a pensar a respeito. Norma ABNT para isso? Quem sabe? Tem um grupo de estudo 103 na ABNT que trata de manejo de vegetação. De repente, nós podemos colocar isso lá. Podemos também traduzir o Best Management Practices para o português. Isso aí é fácil de conseguir com a ISA, um arquivo editável, a gente traduz e, de repente, arruma um patrocinador aí, uma Bayer, uma Basf, uma Corteva, para editar isso no Brasil. E também aquela certificação de manejo de faixas.
Isso eu acho muito legal.
Isso vai dar trabalho. Isso vai dar muito trabalho. Então, mas eu acho que, de repente, nós podemos começar a pensar a respeito. Já que é sarna para coçar, então...
Vamos lá, né?
Sim.
Ótimo, eu acho ótima ideia. Eu acho que são coisas para a gente ir desenvolvendo. Esse grupo é para isso, né? Para a gente desenvolvendo ideias e dar início a novos rumos, novas perspectivas para a gente dentro do IVM no Brasil.
Sim.
Sim? Ok, gente. Pedro, queria te agradecer por ter conversado com o Geoff, por ter tocado a reunião aí. Valeu, obrigada.
Tem que agradecer, não.
Então, o próximo mês a gente trabalha com herbicidas, tá? E enquanto isso, gente, fique à vontade para mandar artigos no grupo, para fazer perguntas. Qualquer coisa nós estamos à disposição. Tá ok?
Ok.
Então, muito obrigada, viu, gente?
Um abraço para todos, até a próxima.
Uma boa semana para todos.
Obrigado e boa tarde a todos.
Até mais,
Tchau.
Boa tarde, obrigadão. Valeu.
Tchau, tchau, gente.